Today, we're unpacking a fundamental challenge to the financial advice most of us grew up hearing.
Mhm.
We're looking at the structural and psychological barriers that really keep many people from building true wealth and, financial independence.
We are diving into a huge paradigm shift. And it starts with, well, with probably the most common piece of advice ever given. Go to school, get good grades, and find a safe, secure job. I mean, that was the unquestioned gospel for nearly a century.
But our source material highlights a critical conflict here. The realization that this traditional counsel, which was, born of industrial age necessity, may actually be disastrous for people born into our rapidly changing, debt-fueled world.
Right.
The financial structure that rewarded safety and high income before, say, 1945, it just isn't the one we inhabit now.
Exactly. And the source kicks off with this fantastic anecdote that really sets the stage. It's about a highly educated CPA, a mother wrestling with her teenage son. And he argued, quite rightly, that the richest people he could think of, Michael Jordan, Madonna, Bill Gates, who famously dropped out of Harvard, none of them relied on that traditional academic path to get their fortunes.
And that's the moment, right? It's the moment when the highly skilled professional realizes the old financial script is broken, and she doesn't actually know the new one. This realization led the CPA, Sharon Lechter, to seek out and partner with Robert Kiyosaki.
The author of the material we're looking at.
Yes, and he was developing an educational product based on the really stark differences and lessons he learned from his two father figures. His poor dad, who was highly educated but always struggled with money, and his rich dad, who was uneducated but became incredibly wealthy.
That dual perspective, the PhD versus the high school dropout, that's really the engine of the whole philosophy we're exploring today.
It is.
So our mission, based entirely on these sources, is to gain some sophisticated new answers for guiding our financial decisions. We're going to dissect the crucial differences in mindset, in strategy, and in understanding the law between those two viewpoints. We need to know where the cash flows and, crucially, how to make it work for us. Okay, let's unpack this critique of conventional education first, because it's a harsh one, but maybe an incredibly relevant one today.
It's pretty blunt.
Yeah. Sharon Lechter, the CPA, she was already concerned about this profound lack of financial education in schools, and she specifically noted the alarming fact that many young people are handed their first credit card before they even finish high school.
And that's the key structural flaw being identified here. The school system, it provides scholastic skills and professional skills. How to pass a test, how to perform a specialized task, how to get hired as a doctor or a mechanic or an accountant.
Sure, job skills.
Job skills.
Yes.
But it fundamentally neglects financial skills and investing acumen. And that creates a terrible vulnerability for people when they graduate.
And the most stunning consequence of that lack of financial training is seeing these highly intelligent, high-earning professionals, bankers, doctors, corporate executives, people who should, in theory, be financially secure. But they're still struggling to pay off student loans or fund retirement. They're trapped by the high cost of their own perceived success.
You see that gap between high income and high net worth all the time, and it's a direct result of being given, half an education.
Right.
Rich Dad's view on this is blunt. He says, it is foolish to simply tell a child to get a good education because that advice assumes the school system prepares them for the world they will actually face.
And the world has changed.
The world has changed dramatically, but the curriculum just hasn't.
He argues that the school system is still largely operating on what the source calls agrarian age ideas, basically teaching kids how to be good workers, not how to manage capital or own systems.
Exactly. Rich Dad insisted that children need more education, but a specific kind. A different kind of education focused on financial intelligence, because they need to know the different sets of rules that the wealthy play by.
So financial literacy isn't an elective.
No, it's a necessary separate skill set. It's required to navigate the modern economy, just as much as reading and writing are.
And this need for accessible, practical financial education is what gave birth to the educational product that brought Kiyosaki and Lechter together. The cash flow game. Robert Kiyosaki, who's described as an investor and businessman, he developed this game as a way to teach these really difficult concepts outside of a dry lecture hall.
And the game prototype itself is a brilliant illustration of the financial journey. I mean, it looks like a colorful board game, maybe a bit like Monopoly, but the genius is in the two tracks and the explicit goal.
Right. The inside track is called the rat race.
Explicitly, yes. And it's defined as that cycle where you work, you earn money, you pay your bills, and you repeat, never really getting ahead. The entire object of the game is, of course, to escape it.
And the way you escape isn't based on luck or rolling a specific number. The source really emphasizes that escaping the rat race requires proficiency in two subjects that are, traditionally seen as notoriously difficult and boring.
Accounting and investing.
Exactly.
And that's the true innovation. The CPA, Lecter, she was surprised and really impressed that Kiyosaki had managed to make learning these two critical subjects both fun and exciting.
So people forget they're even learning.
They do. Players quickly forgot they were learning while they were diligently crunching numbers and evaluating deals to escape that rat race. The philosophical goal here is the ultimate shift, moving your focus from being the person who works for money to being the person who creates systems that allow your money to work for you.
So if the rat race is this treadmill of high effort and low progress, the game is designed to teach you how to step off the treadmill and design the energy source.
Precisely. And the analogy they use to drive home the importance of starting this education early, of building the right foundation, it's incredibly powerful. It directly critiques that common urge to get rich quickly without a proper financial base.
They talk about how so many people, in their drive to get financial success, they try to build an empire state building on a 6-inch slab of concrete.
High aspirations, but the structure beneath is just completely unsound.
And that's a consequence of that outdated school system, right? Still operating on those agrarian age ideas.
Absolutely. Kids graduate with a strong professional skill, but a financial foundation that's akin to dirt floors. So when they start earning high incomes, they immediately try to finance this extravagant life.
And the result of that attempt, they end up with the Leaning Tower of Suburbia.
Which is defined not just by deep debt, but by this chronic financial anxiety. We're talking sleepless nights, marital stress, and the constant panic, searching for quick, rich schemes just to paper over the cracks. It's a life defined by instability, all because of that lack of foundational financial literacy that should have been taught when they were young.
So Rich Dad's solution wasn't about complex financial instruments or anything. It was about pouring that strong, deep financial foundation early on.
Yes, and crucially, doing it simply. When he was teaching his son, Mike and Robert, he started with visual aids. He used pictures and simple words to illustrate jargon like income statement and balance sheet, and he would actually draw out the movement of money.
So the numbers came later.
The numbers and the complex calculations were only added in years later. This simple visual foundation was designed to make sure they understood the story of the cash flow before they ever looked at the figures. And that guided them in building, great sums of wealth on a truly solid, self-analyzed base.
So once that foundation is laid, what is the core lesson? Rich Dad says the secret is incredibly simple, and yet it's almost universally misunderstood. Acquire assets.
That's it.
He argues the reason most people aren't rich is that they fundamentally do not know the working definition of an asset versus a liability.
And the source emphasizes that this confusion, it's rooted in the conventional or, the dictionary definition. If you look up asset, it usually refers to just anything of value that's owned. But what matters for true financial independence isn't some theoretical value, it is the flow of cash.
Okay, so the terms have to be redefined.
Completely. They have to be redefined entirely by their instantaneous impact on your wallet.
So let's drill down on those core cash flow definitions. What are they?
They're simple and they're critical. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
That's it.
That's it. If the money is flowing to you, it's an asset. If it's flowing away from you, it's a liability. End of story.
That distinction highlights why financial statements, the income statement and the balance sheet, are so crucial then. It's not about how big the numbers are, but the story they tell about where the cash is going.
Precisely. The numbers alone mean very little. You have to be able to read the plot, which is the cash flow diagram. Where is the cash flowing? And when you diagram the cash flow through most people's lives, you see three distinct and very familiar patterns emerge. They define the financial trajectory of the poor, the middle class, and the wealthy.
All right, let's start with the simplest flow. The poor person.
The poor person, or maybe a young person still living at home, they typically have a very simple flow. Income comes in from a job, and it flows immediately out to expenses, taxes, food, rent, clothes, you name it.
So their asset and liability columns are basically empty.
Essentially non-existent. The flow is just simple in, simple out.
Now, the moment someone starts earning a higher income and moves into what we call the middle class, the situation doesn't really improve structurally, does it? It just becomes a much bigger, more complex treadmill.
That's the great trap. The middle-class pattern shows income from a job flowing to ever-increasing expenses, taxes, food, mortgage, high-end consumer goods, car payments. But here's the problem. The moment their income increases, they immediately spend that increased income buying things they think are assets.
But they're not.
But they land firmly in the liability column. We're talking about massive mortgages, high-interest consumer loans, escalating credit card debt.
So they dedicate their working lives not to acquiring independence, but to just servicing debt and liabilities. The faster they run, the faster the treadmill spins.
Exactly. They're stuck in the rat race because they continually increase their monthly liabilities without offsetting those costs with any income-generating assets. They spend their entire lives working to pay for the debt they took on to look rich.
Which brings us to the wealthy person's cash flow pattern. And this is structurally the inverse of the middle class.
Completely. The wealthy person's structure is the true definition of having money work for you. Their cash flow starts with the asset column. Things like stocks, bonds, income-producing real estate, notes, intellectual property. These things generate passive income.
And that income covers their expenses.
Yes. That generated income then covers the person's expenses. Their focus isn't on their job. Your goal is purely to grow that asset column so that the cash flow it produces is enough to cover, or ideally far exceed, their expense column. They achieve financial independence when the assets sustain their lifestyle.
Okay, this analysis leads us directly to what is probably the most contentious and counterintuitive point in the source material: the personal home.
Oh, absolutely.
Most people believe, or they're taught, that their home is their greatest asset and their largest investment.
And Rich Dad offers this profound, challenging counterargument. He states that this belief is popular dogma. It's often fueled by emotion, and it significantly lowers a person's financial intelligence. He says a personal residence that is too expensive is fundamentally a liability because it consistently takes money out of your pocket.
Okay, but hold on. For most Americans, the equity in their home is their only savings or wealth accumulation. They pay down the mortgage, the value goes up. I mean, aren't we being a little alarmist calling it a liability?
And that's the critical tension, and the source addresses it head-on by applying that simple cash flow test. An investment property, an asset, generates rent. It puts money in your pocket.
Right.
A personal home, a liability, generates 4 consistent costs: the mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance expenses. It continuously drains money from your pocket. And while a home can appreciate, that appreciation is illiquid, it's highly unpredictable, and it's taxed when you sell it. That makes it a very poor vehicle for cash flow independence.
So the analysis doesn't just stop at labeling it a liability. It details 3 major financial consequences of choosing an overly expensive home instead of investing early and consistently.
And the consequences are profound. They compound over time. First, there's the loss of time. Those early working years are when compounding growth is most powerful, and if your capital is all tied up in a high-maintenance liability, you lose that prime growth period.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, there is the loss of capital, because that money is being poured into maintenance and property taxes instead of being invested in cash-producing vehicles.
And the third consequence sounds the most devastating: the loss of education. What does that mean?
It is devastating. People who tie up all their available capital and income in an expensive primary residence, they often stop investing entirely because they feel house poor, and this costs them experience. It prevents them from becoming what the investment world calls a sophisticated investor. The paradox is that the best investment opportunities, private equity, sophisticated real estate deals, they're often only offered to people who already have investment experience. By playing it safe and buying the big house, they lock themselves out of the market's best deals.
So the rule is simple. If you want a bigger or a flashier house, you first have to focus on buying assets, like an apartment building or a business, that will generate the cash flow you need to pay for that desired house.
The asset pays for the luxury, not your labor. That's financial intelligence at work.
And this leads us to the crucial definition of wealth itself. The source moves beyond the conventional measure of rich or net worth by referencing the architect and inventor Buckminster Fuller.
I love that they bring him in.
Me too. What was his definition of wealth?
Wealth, as defined by Fuller, is a person's ability to survive for so many days forward if they stopped working today. It's a purely pragmatic, time-based measure.
And that's very different from net worth.
It's completely different. Net worth is the theoretical difference between assets and liabilities, but it's often inflated with illiquid assets, personal possessions, the person's extensive junk, and it's taxed the moment those items are sold for a gain.
I see the power of that definition. So if your monthly expenses are, say, $2,000 and your asset column generates 1,000 in passive cash flow, you can only survive for 15 days before you have to work again. Your survival time is limited.
Exactly. Wealth measures the cash flow from the asset column compared to the expense column. Once your asset cash flow reaches $2,000 to cover that $2,000 expense, you are financially wealthy or independent. And that's true, regardless of the theoretical net worth of your collectibles or personal effects.
And at that point, you're no longer dependent on wages.
Right. You can focus on reinvesting that excess cash flow back into the asset column to grow richer without depending on your physical labor.
Okay, so moving from the structural mechanics of the balance sheet to the mindset required to build it, Rich Dad's teaching methodology was, well, it was decidedly non-classroom. It began with an initiation into the working world in 1956, where Robert and his friend Mike were asked to work for the grand sum of 10 cents an hour, 30 cents a day.
It was designed to be a psychological challenge, not an economic opportunity. The work was described as excruciatingly boring. Dusting canned goods in a hot, dimly lit Hawaiian superette for 3 hours every Saturday, week after week.
Yeah.
This incredibly low pay, even for 1956, was designed to create an emotional crucible.
And, well, the inevitable happened. After 3 weeks, young Robert, feeling completely exploited by this cheapskate and furious that Rich Dad hadn't kept his end of the bargain to teach them, he was ready to quit. He demanded a raise or to be fired. He called the job cruel torture.
And this confrontation is the entire point. This is where the profound psychological lesson begins. Rich Dad explained that the 10-cent pay was designed to let life push Robert around so he could actually hear the lesson.
So it wasn't about the money at all.
Not at all. Rich Dad said, I could talk until I was blue in the face, but you wouldn't hear a thing if Robert was just focused on getting paid immediately.
So what is the lesson of emotions when life pushes you around?
When life pushes, which it inevitably does with financial pressure or a job loss or a health scare, people generally do one of two common self-defeating things. One, they let life push them into submission. They give up, become apathetic, or focus only on security, choosing to live small and fearful.
And the second one, too.
They get angry and they push back, but often against the wrong targets. Their boss, their job, their spouse, without realizing it's just life pushing them to find a better solution.
So the anger is misdirected. They're fighting the symptoms, not the underlying cause.
Correct. The few who succeed, Rich Dad explained, are those who welcome the pushing. They pause, they feel the emotion, the fear, the frustration, the anger, but then they use it as a catalyst to learn the lesson and change their approach.
And he had a warning about playing it safe.
A huge warning. Rich Dad's ultimate warning was that playing it safe means you live your life terrified of taking risks. You choose submission over the excitement of winning, and you risk dying a boring old man who let life push him into chronic safety.
The fear of taking risks is clearly the first emotional hurdle, but Rich Dad identifies this powerful tandem that motivates most people to stay in the rat race. Fear and desire, which he equates to greed.
There's two sides of the same coin. Fear, specifically the constant fear of not being able to pay your bills, that motivates you to get up every day and go to work. And desire or greed, the yearning for something better, prettier, more comfortable, a new car, a vacation, that motivates you to seek raises and more joy through purchases.
And the source notes this is the endless loop. You work for money, you get a short-lived burst of joy from a purchase, the bills pile up, the fear returns, you need more money for more joy or security, and the cycle just continues.
It's working for a short-term solution, a job, or a paycheck, to a long-term problem, which is financial insecurity. The irony is that the job, the supposed solution, it merely reinforces the emotional cycle.
So what's the alternative?
Rich Dad suggests that when that fear arises, instead of immediately looking for a higher-paying job, people should pause and ask, will a job be the best long-term solution to this fear? And over the course of a lifetime, the answer is usually no, because as your income rises, the fear of losing that income often rises right along with it. The solution to fear and desire cannot be found in the paycheck.
It's also interesting how the source addresses the denial of money. You know, when people say, oh, I'm not interested in money, trying to seem above it all.
That denial, people claiming, I'm not interested in money, while still working diligently 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it's described as just as psychotic as being overly attached to it. It's a denial of reality, often driven by fear of failure or a misplaced belief that money is somehow dirty or unimportant.
Right.
Rich Dad's own educated father often used that phrase, I'm not interested in money, But he always covered himself by saying, "I work because I love my job," justifying his submission to the paycheck.
So after 3 weeks of this psychological conditioning, feeling the push of life and using their frustration constructively, how did Robert and Mike finally use their imagination to find a financial opportunity without a paycheck?
By withholding the pay, Rich Dad created massive pressure that forced them to use their ingenuity. And this led to the discovery of Mrs. Martin, cutting the covers off unsold comic books for credit and then just throwing the rest of the magazines away.
That's the true light bulb moment. They recognize value in what someone else was discarding, and instead of trading their time for money, they created a system.
They started a comic book library in an unused room, charging 10 cents for entry. And the outcome was the crucial first lesson.
Mm.
They learned to have money work for them through a business system. Their business-generated passive income money flowed in, even when they weren't physically present or actively working.
So they weren't paid for their labor.
They were paid for the system they designed. Rich Dad gave them something much more valuable than a paycheck. The realization that they could control their own finances and systems completely independent of an employer.
That transition is crucial. Once they mastered that psychological freedom, having money work for them, Rich Dad says they needed to know the rules of the system to avoid being pushed around by bullies, specifically the government.
Mm-hmm.
This moves us into the biggest secret of the rich: the tax trap and the strategic use of corporations.
This takes us back in history a bit. Historically, income tax was almost unheard of. In Britain, taxes were temporary war levies, like during the Napoleonic Wars. In the U.S., they were levied for the Civil War.
But then something changed.
The seismic shift came when income tax became permanent. In England in 1874 and in the U.S. with the 16th Amendment in 1913.
And the way this permanent income tax was sold to the public is the critical part of this lesson, because it immediately led to these unintended consequences for the majority.
Absolutely. Rich Dad explained that the income tax was made popular by assuring the poor and middle class that it would only punish the rich. So the masses voted for the law, making it constitutionally legal. But the crucial irony is that once the government got a taste for the money, its appetite grew, and the burden wound up falling heaviest on the very people who voted for it.
The poor and middle class.
Right, because they didn't have the structures to protect themselves. Meanwhile, the rich viewed the tax law not as a punishment, but as an opportunity. They created rules and structures, primarily the corporation, to legally play a different financial game.
So what's the history of the corporation?
That's the structural brilliance. Corporations were initially designed way back in the days of sailing ships just to limit risk. If the ship was lost, the investor's loss was capped at the capital they invested in that specific voyage. Today, this structure puts the rich way ahead of the pack, offering two major legal advantages that employees simply cannot access.
Okay, let's break down the first one, which is the spend first, get taxed last rule. This seems like a profound structural advantage.
It is. The employee has income, the government takes its portion first via withholding, and then the employee tries to live on what's left, post-tax dollars.
Mm-hmm.
A corporation, conversely, earns money, and then it is legally allowed to spend everything it possibly can before taxes are calculated. This means expenses like company cars, vacations documented as board meetings, health club fees, business meals. They're all paid for with pre-tax dollars. The corporation is only taxed on the net profit that remains. It's a massive legal tax loophole.
That is the difference between earning $100,000, paying $30,000 in taxes, and then spending the remaining $70,000, versus earning $100,000, spending $30,000 on lifestyle expenses through the corporation, and only being taxed on the $70,000 that remains.
Exactly. The same expenses are now paid with structurally different dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And the second major tax advantage we see highlighted is in real estate investing, the 1031 exchange.
The source calls this legal jargon, but its implication is immense. What is the 1031 exchange, and why is it so powerful for the wealthy?
The 1031 exchange is an explicit section of the IRS code that allows a real estate investor to sell a property for a gain, but delay paying capital gains tax indefinitely. Indefinitely, provided they exchange that property for a like kind of property of equal or greater value within a strict timeline. The crucial implication is that 100% of the capital, the original investment plus the profit, is immediately reinvested and continues to compound.
So instead of paying, say, 20 or 30% of the profit to the government, which forces them to reinvest less capital, they keep all of it working for them, continually trading up in value.
It's continuous capital compounding, tax deferred. You can trade up in asset value indefinitely. The tax is only incurred when the investor decides to liquidate their entire portfolio and stop investing, which many wealthy individuals never do. They often leave the asset portfolio to their heirs, which offers even further tax advantages upon death.
Beyond tax savings, the corporation is also described as a powerful tool for protection in a litigious society.
Precisely. We live in a society where lawsuits are common. The rich use financial vehicles like corporations and trusts to legally protect their assets from creditors or liability lawsuits. They structure their affairs so they control everything, but legally own nothing in their personal name.
So if a lawsuit occurs against the individual,
The corporation's assets are often protected. The contrast is tragic. The poor and middle class typically try to own everything, their house, their car, their savings, and when they're sued, or when they face a major financial reversal, those assets are easily targeted by the government or creditors.
they spend their lives accumulating things in their own name, making themselves targets.
Right. The financially intelligent structure their affairs so the assets reside within vehicles designed specifically for protection.
This all boils down to the final recommendation in this section, minding your own business.
When you look at the cash flow diagram of the typical employee or homeowner, you realize they are working for three separate external parties. First, they work for the business owner or employer, making them richer. Second, they work for the government via taxes. Some people work the first 5 months of the year just for the taxman.
And third,
And third, they work for the bank via the mortgage and consumer liability interest. They are the central engine making everyone else wealthy.
so the recommendation isn't to just quit your job recklessly, but to change the focus of that W-2 income.
Keep your daytime job to pay for your life, but stop using your income to purchase liabilities. Start diligently building a real, separate asset column. This means buying businesses, cash-flowing real estate, stocks, bonds, notes, intellectual property. And crucially, you have to avoid using that high income to buy liabilities or personal effects that lose value instantly, like a new car, which loses nearly 25% of its value the moment it leaves the lot.
Those are just expenses disguised as wealth. Okay, financial literacy and structural knowledge only get you halfway there. The sources identify 5 major psychological roadblocks that keep even financially literate, high-income people from successfully building an abundant asset column. Let's start with the most common and powerful one: fear.
The fear of losing money is very real, and it is a painful, paralyzing emotion. Rich Dad knows he has never met a rich person who hasn't lost money investing, but he has met countless poor people who have never lost a dime.
Because they never invested in the first place.
Right. That's a profound difference in outcome dictated entirely by your attitude toward loss. The pain of losing money is often far greater than the perceived theoretical joy of being rich for most people, so they stay paralyzed.
So they play not to lose.
Their approach is to play not to lose, which translates into highly specific financial strategies. If you hate risk and worry, Rich Dad advises you must start early, accumulating a nest egg in secure retirement plans and hiring a financial planner you trust to manage conservative growth. This is the path for those who value safety and stability above all else.
But the truly successful, the people who seek financial freedom and massive growth, they have a different attitude toward failure. Rich Dad calls it the Texas attitude.
The Texas attitude is all about the perspective you take on failure. They live it big, and when they fail, like at the Alamo, which was a tragic military defeat, they still use that moment as a rallying cry, shouting, "Remember the Alamo." It celebrates the fighting spirit, the willingness to put capital at risk, even if it results in a loss.
So failure doesn't end their journey.
It inspires them to win the next time, because they learned a valuable lesson.
And this attitude dictates their investment focus, moving away from the conventional wisdom of balance.
If you have little money and you want to be rich, you must be focused, not balanced at the start. A balanced portfolio scattered across CDs, low-yield bonds, low-growth mutual funds, that's for people who already have wealth and are simply playing not to lose it.
But not for the beginner.
No. People like Thomas Edison, Bill Gates, Donald Trump, they were all initially focused or highly unbalanced, putting a large concentration of resources into one specific venture.
So if you're starting out, you need to put a lot of your eggs in a few baskets you monitor closely, rather than scattering a few eggs thinly into many baskets you barely notice.
Precisely. To make rapid progress, you must accept a period of being unbalanced, leveraging your knowledge and focus rather than just diversity.
The second roadblock is overcoming cynicism, or what is termed the Chicken Little phenomenon.
Cynicism is just unchecked doubt and fear expressed externally. Rich Dad's maxim here is, cynics criticize, and winners analyze. The noise of criticism blinds you to opportunities, while analytical thought opens your eyes to deals everyone else misses.
The world is full of Chicken Littles.
Running around yelling, "The sky is falling," discouraging anyone who tries something new.
And we see this beautifully illustrated in the sources with the friend Richard, who backed out of an amazing deal based on bad advice.
Yeah, Richard found a 2-bedroom townhome in Phoenix for just $42,000, significantly below market value. He bought it, but 2 weeks later, he backed out because his neighbor, a reliable but financially uneducated person, told him it was a bad deal.
So he listened to the fear.
He listened to the fear of the neighbor instead of analyzing the numbers himself. A few years later, that very unit was worth $95,000. The source concludes that doubt, unchecked cynicism, is incredibly expensive.
And the cynicism often manifests as focusing on the noise or minor details instead of analyzing the big opportunity. They call it the "I don't want to fix toilets" trap.
This is the perfect example of small thinking. People hear about real estate, they immediately think of the hassle of a break-in toilet or an eviction, and they close their minds to the entire investment vehicle. They focus on the don't want rather than the passive income and freedom the investment offers.
And the rich dad solution.
Analyze the noise and hire a great property manager. The "I don't wants" often hold the key to your success because figuring out how to bypass them is exactly what accelerates your progress.
The classic analogy used for perseverance against the cynicism, of course, is Colonel Sanders.
Arlen Sanders lost his business at 66 and started living on a skimpy Social Security check. He was famously turned down 1,009 times while selling his fried chicken recipe. But he persevered, driven by an unwavering belief in his product, and became a multimillionaire at an age when most people retire.
So the instruction is clear.
When faced with fear and doubt, you must be the one to fry the little chicken. You have to ignore the cynics and persevere.
All right, moving to roadblock number 3. Overcoming laziness, which, counterintuitively, is often manifested as staying busy.
Busyness is a defense mechanism. Busy people are often the most lazy financially. They stay busy working long hours, watching endless TV, filling their schedule with hobbies, as a way of actively avoiding facing something important.
Like their debt or their health.
Exactly, their debt, their health, their lack of retirement savings. They use their schedule as a comfortable shield.
And the cure for this avoidance, somewhat shockingly, is encouraging a little greed or desire.
Many people were conditioned from childhood to suppress desire with guilt. We're not rich people, or you must be satisfied with what you have. But Rich Dad encourages using that desire for a better life, a life of freedom and security, as motivation.
And how do you do that?
The cure for financial laziness is replacing the phrase, "I can't afford it," with the active question, "How can I afford it?"
That reframing is key. Saying, "I can't afford it," just shuts down the mind. It induces sadness, apathy, acceptance.
But asking, "How can I afford it?" opens up possibilities. It forces creative thinking and strengthens the mind and spirit. It forces ingenuity. You use that WIIFM motivation, "What's in it for me," to overcome avoidance and make progress toward a better life.
Yeah.
Without that desire for something better, progress isn't made.
Roadblock number 4 involves overcoming bad habits, specifically when it comes to cash flow management. This focuses on the counterintuitive pay yourself first rule.
The contrast here is fundamental. Poor Dad paid everyone else first, bills, mortgage, taxes, leaving himself last, usually with nothing left to invest. Rich Dad's habit was to pay himself first, even before the government and creditors.
Now, I have to challenge this. That sounds fundamentally irresponsible. I mean, if Rich Dad lets creditors scream, how does he maintain his credit rating or avoid major legal trouble? This goes against every piece of conventional financial advice.
It is entirely counterintuitive, and that is the point. Rich Dad's rationale was motivation. He knew the creditors and the government would scream louder and be far more demanding than he would be if he failed to pay himself.
Ah, okay.
That resulting pressure forces him to seek other forms of income, to work harder mentally, and to find solutions to satisfy the pressure. It's a mechanism for building financial muscle under stress.
So the fear of the bully, the bill collector, is used as a tool to make him mentally stronger, to force his ingenuity to generate new cash flow rather than just capitulating and paying the bills with money that should have been invested.
Exactly. If he paid himself last, he'd feel no pressure, he'd make poor excuses, and he'd remain financially broke. However, and this is a big however, this strategy comes with a major necessary warning. It requires fierce self-discipline, and the first rule is always, don't get into consumer debt in the first place.
Right.
Rich Dad minimizes his income subject to tax and avoids high consumer debt. So when he pays his bills last, they are small and unimportant, allowing him to maintain excellent credit while prioritizing his asset growth.
The final roadblock is arrogance.
Arrogance is the mask ignorance wears. Rich Dad famously warned that intelligence combined with arrogance equals ignorance. When someone argues or blusters their way through a financial discussion instead of listening, it's a sign they don't know what they're talking about and they are refusing to learn.
So what does a truly intelligent person do?
A truly intelligent, financially aware person welcomes new ideas, asks questions, and listens far more than they talk. 2 ears, 1 mouth. They constantly absorb new ideas and possibilities.
So we've covered the structure of the system and the psychology needed to succeed in it. To put these lessons into practice, you need financial IQ, which the source describes as the synergy of many skills and talents built on 4 broad technical areas of expertise.
These are the 4 technical pillars of financial intelligence that have to be developed in tandem. Number 1 is accounting, or financial literacy. This is the left brain side. It focuses on details and the ability to read and understand financial statements, the income statement, and the balance sheet.
And this allows you to spot a good deal from a bad one.
Exactly. It allows you to identify the true strengths and weaknesses of any business or investment opportunity. The more money you're responsible for, the more accuracy this skill requires.
Number 2, investing.
This is the right brain creative side, the science of money making money. It involves the creativity of devising and utilizing strategies, formulas, and deal structuring. This is where you assess risk and return.
Okay, then there's number 3, understanding markets.
This is the science of supply and demand, and it involves 2 key factors. The technical aspects are emotion-driven, like the frenzied demand for the Tickle Me Elmo doll in 1996 or, stock bubbles. This often deals with timing and chart reading.
And the other side.
The fundamental aspects. This addresses the economic sense of an investment based on current long-term supply and demand conditions. You need to understand both the emotional timing and the underlying economic reality.
And finally, the strategic wrapper that accelerates all the others and is often the most neglected by the middle class. Number 4, the law.
Utilizing a corporate structure, legally wrapped around the other 3 technical skills, is what allows for explosive growth. It provides significant tax advantages and protection from lawsuits. The individual who masters all 4 is like someone flying, while an employee who only has accounting and investing skill is still walking.
So the synergy is key.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Accounting tells you what happened, investing tells you how to generate the capital, markets tell you when to strike, and the law protects the entire framework.
It's not just technical knowledge, though. The source also heavily emphasizes management skills. It argues that many talented people remain poor, not because they can't make a better product like cooking a better hamburger than McDonald's, but because they know little about business systems.
The ability to cook a better hamburger is useless if you don't know how to create the system to deliver it efficiently, market it, and manage the finances. The necessary management skills are threefold: management of cash flow, management of systems, which includes yourself and your time with family, and management of people.
That focus on people management, especially managing people who are smarter than you, is fascinating.
It is the sign of a true leader. You must be able to manage and pay well the people who are technically smarter than you in certain areas, like bankers, lawyers, or accountants.
Yeah.
You need to build a high-performing metaphorical board of directors around you, comprised of experts whose technical knowledge you leverage.
And within people management, there's a crucial specialization required for personal success: sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing are essentially communication skills, writing, speaking, and negotiating. These are the base skills of success that allow you to articulate value and close deals. The source emphasizes dedicating time to constantly work on these skills, whether by attending courses, joining public speaking groups, or buying tapes to expand your knowledge. You must be able to communicate effectively to raise capital and move products.
Now let's wrap up with the strategies for action and learning, moving from philosophy to implementation. Rich Dad quotes a gold miner. There is gold everywhere. Most people are not trained to see it.
And this applies directly to finding investment deals that the cynical, the chicken littles, they just walk right past.
So what's the first actionable step?
It's philosophical, but it's critical. Invest first in education. The only real asset you have that is truly recession-proof is your mind. Most people impulsively buy investments rather than first investing and learning about investing.
And the source gives a great specific example of the ROI on education.
Yes. Robert Kiyosaki, for example, took a 3-day real estate seminar for $385 that ultimately made him at least $2 million in profits. It provided him with a specific, actionable strategy. It bought him life and freedom. That educational investment paid exponentially more than any single stock purchase at the time.
This emphasis on learning also involves finding and emulating financial heroes.
Emulating heroes like Donald Trump, Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch, or George Soros is a powerful way to learn. It helps you tap into raw genius. Heroes make investing look achievable because they provide a simplified, proven blueprint, convincing the learner if they can do it, I can follow their general strategy too.
Next, the strategy for acquiring luxuries has to be fundamentally flipped from the middle-class approach. You have to avoid the keep up with the Joneses trap.
You must let assets buy luxuries. Do not buy luxuries on credit. The example given is Robert's wife wanting a Mercedes. She was required to wait 4 years while the real estate investment portfolio grew until the cash flow from their apartment houses was sufficient to pay for the car using before-tax dollars through their business. The car became a true reward for financial intelligence, not a burden of consumer debt.
Finally, we have the tactical how-tos for finding deals and executing on the philosophy. Let's start with the fundamental step: change your behavior.
First, stop doing what isn't working. If you keep doing the same thing, the definition of insanity, you will get the same results. Second, look for new ideas or formulas, like the book, The 16% Solution for Tax Lien Certificates. And third, take action. Don't research endlessly. Don't let cynics who haven't done it talk you out of your thoroughly researched action plan.
And in terms of finding the deals themselves, it requires some investigative work.
Find someone who has done it, like the county tax office employee for the tax liens, and take them to lunch to learn their insider tricks of the trade. Fourth, make lots of offers. The profit is made when you buy, not when you sell, so you must negotiate aggressively. Often offer half of the asking price because most sellers welcome any interest. And always protect yourself by using escape clauses like subject to the approval of my business partner.
That strategy of making lots of low offers sounds intimidating, but it's really just a numbers game, isn't it?
It is entirely a numbers game. You might make 100 offers, have 99 rejected, and the one that is accepted is where you make your fortune. Fifth, look for bargain and change. Jog or drive a certain neighborhood regularly. Even talk to postal carriers or moving truck drivers to spot changes like long-standing for sale signs or new commercial developments that indicate a bargain is about to become a profitable opportunity.
And thinking bigger is key here, too. You have to expand your view beyond a single property.
Small thinkers remain small because they only pursue small, easily attainable goals. Rich Dad suggests, buy the pie and cut it into pieces, rather than only buying a small slice. For instance, if you have a friend who wants a specific piece of land, buy the entire larger parcel, sell the desirable piece to your friend immediately, and keep the remainder for free or at a greatly reduced cost. Thinking bigger ensures you get the big breaks because you're creating that opportunity, not just finding it.
This has been a profoundly challenging deep dive into a philosophy that fundamentally redefines our relationship with assets, with risk, and crucially, our relationship with work itself. The core distinction we keep coming back to is simple. Do you work for money, or do you have money work for you?
Financial intelligence is the ultimate defense mechanism, and it's defined here as the synergy of those technical skills: accounting, investing, markets, and law, combined with emotional courage, specifically overcoming the roadblocks of fear, cynicism, laziness, and bad habits.
And the power of choice remains the single most important asset you possess. Every day, with every dollar that enters your hand, you cast a vote, deciding your financial destiny. Rich, poor, or middle class.
In today's world, what you know is often old because the system changes so fast. The most valuable skill required is how quickly you learn and adapt. That speed of learning is priceless.
This leads to the final provocative thought from the source material, something to consider as you contemplate your next career move or educational investment. Rich Dad suggested this observation of the rat race. Workers work hard enough to not be fired, and owners pay just enough so that workers won't quit. If you are seeking new skills and long-term financial freedom, should your immediate focus be on working for pay and benefits that reward you only in the short term?
Or should you instead seek out work, perhaps even unpaid or low-paying work, specifically for what you will learn in the long term, thereby strengthening your financial IQ? The decision to prioritize educational opportunity over immediate earning is often the first vital step out of the rat race.